The minimum depth requirement for polyvinyl chloride conduit buried underground is typically measured from the top of the conduit to the finished grade, meaning ground level. In most cases, the rock and blacktop situated above the conduit would not be considered as contributing to this required depth. The depth requirement is intended to ensure adequate protection for the conduit. The purpose of burying electrical conduit at a specific depth is to safeguard it from various potential hazards. Firstly, mechanical damage is a primary concern. The weight of vehicles, equipment, or even just foot traffic can exert significant pressure on the ground surface. Without sufficient burial depth, the conduit could be crushed or otherwise damaged, leading to electrical failures or safety risks. Secondly, freezing temperatures can pose a threat, especially in colder climates. When water freezes, it expands, which can put stress on buried infrastructure. Burying conduit below the frost line helps to prevent damage from freeze-thaw cycles. Thirdly, soil conditions can also play a role. Certain types of soil may be corrosive or abrasive, which can degrade the conduit over time. Adequate burial depth can help to minimize exposure to these harsh conditions. Unless local codes or other applicable standards explicitly state otherwise, the polyvinyl chloride conduit must be buried at the required minimum depth below the finished grade. This requirement applies regardless of the materials that may be placed above it. In the situation described, the 8 inches of rock and 2 inches of blacktop would generally not be factored into the calculation of the minimum burial depth. This is because these materials are considered to be above the finished grade, not part of it. To determine the specific minimum burial depth for polyvinyl chloride conduit in Tampa, Florida, it is essential to consult the relevant local codes and regulations. These codes may vary depending on the specific location and application. It is always best to err on the side of caution and bury the conduit deeper than the minimum requirement if there is any doubt about the adequacy of the cover. Consulting with a qualified electrician or electrical inspector is recommended to ensure compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. They can provide guidance on the specific requirements for the project and help to avoid potential problems down the road. The National Electrical Code, or NEC, provides guidelines for electrical installations, including the burial depth of conduits. However, local codes may amend or supplement the NEC requirements. Therefore, it is important to check with the local authorities to determine the specific requirements for the area. For example, NEC Table 300.5 specifies minimum cover requirements for direct buried cables, conduits, and raceways. This table outlines different burial depths based on voltage levels, wiring methods, and location types. It is crucial to review this table and any applicable local amendments to determine the correct burial depth for the specific installation. When installing polyvinyl chloride conduit underground, it is essential to follow proper installation practices to ensure its long-term reliability. This includes using proper fittings and connectors, ensuring that the conduit is properly supported, and backfilling the trench with suitable materials. It is also important to avoid sharp bends in the conduit, as these can create stress points and reduce its lifespan. In addition to the burial depth requirements, it is also important to consider the type of soil in which the conduit is being buried. Some soils may be corrosive or abrasive, which can damage the conduit over time. If the soil is known to be corrosive, it may be necessary to use a special type of conduit that is resistant to corrosion. It is also important to ensure that the trench is properly backfilled to prevent the conduit from shifting or settling over time. The backfill material should be free of rocks and other debris that could damage the conduit. The backfill should also be compacted to prevent settling. When installing conduit near other underground utilities, it is important to maintain a safe distance to avoid potential conflicts. The NEC specifies minimum separation distances between electrical conduits and other utilities, such as gas pipes, water pipes, and communication cables. These separation distances are intended to prevent damage to the utilities and to protect workers from potential hazards. It is also important to check with the local utility companies to determine if there are any specific requirements for installing conduit near their facilities. They may require the conduit to be located in a specific area or to be installed in a certain way. Before starting any excavation work, it is essential to contact the local call center to have underground utilities marked. This will help to prevent damage to the utilities and to protect workers from potential hazards. The call center will notify the utility companies, who will then send representatives to mark the location of their underground facilities. It is important to wait until all of the utilities have been marked before starting any excavation work. When working with electricity, it is always important to follow safe work practices to prevent accidents. This includes wearing appropriate personal protective equipment, such as safety glasses and gloves. It is also important to de-energize the circuit before working on it and to use proper lockout/tag-out procedures to prevent accidental energization. If you are not qualified to work with electricity, it is best to hire a qualified electrician to do the work. Electrical work can be dangerous, and it is important to take all necessary precautions to prevent accidents. In summary, when determining the minimum burial depth for polyvinyl chloride conduit, you must follow these steps. Firstly, consult the relevant local codes and regulations. Secondly, refer to NEC Table 300.5 and any applicable local amendments. Thirdly, consider the type of soil in which the conduit is being buried. Fourthly, maintain safe distances from other underground utilities. Fifthly, contact the local call center to have underground utilities marked. Lastly, follow safe work practices to prevent accidents. By following these steps, you can ensure that the polyvinyl chloride conduit is installed safely and properly, protecting it from damage and ensuring its long-term reliability. Remember, electrical codes and regulations are in place to protect people and property from the hazards of electricity. Compliance with these codes is not only a legal requirement but also a moral obligation. Always take the time to understand the applicable codes and regulations and to follow safe work practices. If you have any questions or concerns, consult with a qualified electrician or electrical inspector. They can provide guidance and help you to ensure that the electrical installation is safe and code compliant. The information provided is for general guidance only and should not be considered a substitute for professional advice. Always consult with a qualified electrician or electrical inspector to determine the specific requirements for your project.